Welcome back to the CUBE studio here live at AWS Summit in Washington, DC 2026. We are bringing you all the live action on the ground. And join me now for a conversation on threat landscape that is bigger than most of us can imagine is Steve Schmidt, Chief Security Officer at Amazon. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Gemma.
When I think of what it must be like to wake up as the CSO of Amazon every day, it's pretty hard to imagine. But when I read in the brief that your threat intelligence system, MadPot, which by the way is fantastically named, love the name, monitors 1 billion adverse threat signals a day, I was like, holy God, that is crazy. So Steve, maybe start and tell us, what is it like to be you?
I've got a really fun job, to being frank. I mean, at least I love it. It's a rare situation where you get to do everything from satellites to robots to the cloud, which is what this conference is about here today. And it gives me an opportunity to see portions of our customer base that aren't otherwise visible to some folks. And also, frankly, we can build knowledge about adversaries much better than people who don't have that same diversity of customer set or of different abilities to see in different tech sectors, as an example. The net result is that we get to be able to figure out how we're going to do things like MadPot that draw our adversaries in, give them a false sense of what's going on, and then for us to derive information about what they're doing, how they're doing it, and hopefully to get to the point where we understand why. Because the why the human is doing something inappropriate is really interesting. It helps inform where they're going to go in the future. You know, we talked earlier about the motivations for people, whether it's money or ideology or influence or the big one, ego. You know, who can be the biggest, baddest hacker out there?
I think it's anything more scary than somebody that does it just for ego alone, right? That is more terrifying than the financial...
Well, that's actually true. Someone who's doing it for ego is predictable in a different way than someone who's doing it for money. Money is very clear. They're going to take steps that are required to get access to data that they can sell, that they can monetize in some way, et cetera. Ego could be all about just making a mess.
So MadPot, let's get into that. This is a lot more than just open telemetry.
Yeah.
This is truly unique in terms of the scale of what it drives, right? Separating signals from true threats, right? And we know that in the world of cybersecurity, it can be a busy and fragmented space.
Yep.
A lot of time spent on, software or security operations centers, just like monitoring. But this is something much larger than that. Break it down and tell me about the role of AI and how that is fundamentally shifting the world of MadPot.
Certainly. So MadPot is, for an easy description, it's a honeypot network. So adversaries scan it, and by the way, it takes less than 90 seconds for an adversary to find one of our new sensors when we put it up. And within 3 minutes, they try and exploit it. Why is this important? Because two things are occurring. One is we're getting real examples of exploitation attempts that we can use to inform defense. And more importantly, we can inform that defense that that adversary is active right now. So they're coming from a particular location, using a particular set of tools, trying to get access to a certain set of sources or resources, and we can make those defense changes that are necessary to defend or deflect against that adversary in close to real time. How does AI figure into this? What AI allows us to do is to build those defense mechanisms much more quickly than we could otherwise. It used to be, for example, that it would take us 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours to come up with a set of sensor inputs that would say, here for all the customers we're helping to protect, this is the signature that you need to look for. With AI, we can come up with candidates for those sensor signatures in less than 15 minutes. In many cases, less than 5 minutes. The net result being better defenses more quickly. Now, the interesting thing is human responsibility. Where does it come into that loop? We believe pretty strongly that humans have to be responsible for the use of AI from top to bottom. So when we come up with a new set of sensor rules to say this is an alarm, a human looks at it and says, yeah, I think this is right. Or maybe it needs to be adjusted in a certain way.
And we hear a lot about agents operating within cyber environments, right? Agents creating this signal,
right.
And also even the role potentially of agents as, taking action, moving from, just creating a vector to actually say, okay, we need to do something immediately. How do you guys think about that, and how close do you think we are to agents operating autonomously and running a kill switch, for example? Do you think are we closer than we believe, or what are your thoughts?
I think in most cases what we see is that agents are about 80% accurate, more or less. It depends on the model, the situation, a lot of things. But what it does tell us is that agents are not perfect. And for the foreseeable future, the science doesn't indicate they will be perfect. So what we've chosen to do is when an agent comes up with a decision on something, we use a separate model to evaluate the decision and say, is this correct? That raises the accuracy level dramatically. And then for high impact decisions, in Amazon we call these one-way doors. So a one-way door is something that's really hard to reverse when you go through the door. Where a two-way door, I don't like that, I can roll it back really easily. For a one-way door decision, we have a human who says yes or no at the end of it. For something that's a two-way door decision, awesome, let the agent go take the action.
So when we think about Amazon and the reason, we just had someone from Palantir and he talked about how a lot of his customers choose Amazon, right? Because it provides predictability, security, and a level of ownership too of the problem, right? It almost, in some respects, people believe it gives you that throat to choke if something goes wrong, right? But we also know that many times a lot of these vulnerabilities are created by fragmented and vulnerable environments, and there's certain preconditions that need to exist to optimize services like yours.
Right.
How are you seeing that shift, especially now that there's such a race? It's all about speed. It's almost like act now, think later in the world of tech. And public sector folks, government folks are under pressures to perform at, McKinsey levels.
Right.
That really wasn't the case 5 years ago. Like, what does it mean from your perspective as you build solutions to suit their needs?
So what we have to aim at and what we deliver to customers is a situation where they can offload a lot of the hard work to us. So for example, does a customer want to run something like MadPot? Well, it might be a really fun science experiment for them to do it, but in reality, it takes our scale and our size to be able to make effective use of it. So we build these services which allow us to create solutions for customers so they don't have to do it. So for example, if you look at our security services like Guard Duty, it takes inputs from MadPot to determine what it tells you as an alarm. That means you don't have to think about that work, you just use it as a customer. That gets ever more important when two things happen. The complexity of the environment changes, number one, which is constantly changing. Number two, the velocity of change. And I think that's what people are seeing with AI right now is it doesn't fundamentally change what an attacker can do. It changes the way an attacker can do it in terms of time. It can do many more things much more rapidly than they would be able to before. But it can also advantage defenders. Because if we build the right tooling, we can use that speed of AI to create defenses much more quickly than we ever could before.
So we know in the world of public sector and cloud, there's also the world of the edge, right? Mm-hmm. Which is becoming far more prominent than it was 5 years ago. I think most of us know what that means now, right? Did we know that term? Was it a term I used daily 3 years ago? Absolutely not.
Yep.
How does the solution differ from the perspective of what you have to build, how you secure, how you lock down, and how you contain actually once any sort of threat gets inside an environment on the edge versus, like the cloud of old per se?
It's all about what horsepower is available to you. So if you look at what your laptop can do as an example, it has a certain amount of compute that you can do locally, a certain amount of data storage, a certain amount of power that's available. Fundamentally, that's one of the limiting factors. And when we look at the way responses are changing in the security space, you are needing increasing horsepower of devices to make effective use of security tools, which means more of it has to be done as a service centrally than it can be on the endpoint. However, there are certain things which can only take place on the endpoint. Let's say you're using an agent on your laptop there, maybe OpenClaw as an example. You need to have software installed on that endpoint that number one, tells your business you've got that agent. Number two, provides an identity for that agent so it can be tracked, it has permissions, those sorts of things. And three, that it can tell what happened with the use of that agent. Those are all things where we work with partners. For example, CrowdStrike. We do a lot of work with them on understanding how agents are behaving on individual edge devices so that we can fuse that data that we have in our services in the cloud to come up with a unified picture of what's going on. And it's only when you put those pieces together that you really get the whole story, which is necessary as a defender to understand not only the what, but the who and the why.
Because the day it's in it and the news cycle today, I have to ask you about Mythos and Fable, right? Because it's obviously back in action for certain customers as of this morning. There's a lot of commentary out there around what this should look like, will look like, who knows right now, right? We know that there is a speed of deployment here and a risk level that is somewhat unique, if not, it's never existed to the same extent before. What are your thoughts from the perspective of clients and customers that you work with every day, and how you think about staying ahead of bad actors, but also, producing and deploying technology at the speed of the market and the global market especially?
Mythos is one example of models that are very good at cyber tasks, and I don't like the term cyber, but it's appropriate here. And what it's done is it's pointed out to us that models in the future will be more effective not only at finding vulnerabilities, which it is, but also chaining them together automatically so that systems can be exploited automatically by models. The last piece of that is building the exploit itself. And previous models have not been really expert at doing that. Other models, whether it's a GPT model or Mythos, seem to have more capability there, and that's what the government seems to be very concerned about. We all agree that finding problems in software is something that models have to be able to do. I want secure software shipped. What is the flip side of secure software? Insecure software. So finding the vulnerability is important to my ability to ship securely. The question is, does it give every person out there access to the rest of the exploit chain, which we don't really need in the public? I think this is a situation where we have to find that fine line balance, but it also points out a problem that you brought up, which is deployment velocity. The biggest risk that I think we have as an industry is not finding vulnerabilities, it's not building patches for them, it's how quickly can we deploy those patches. Many people operated in a world where they thought a patch deployment interval of 30 days, 60 days, 90 days was perfectly reasonable given the threat landscape that they operate in. With the newer models, I don't think that's possible anymore. I think we're going to have to be talking about deployment intervals that are measured in hours at the outside, especially for the most sensitive workloads. Wow. And even those, that may be a long time, if adversaries can do what with models? Be much more efficient at attacking things. They don't get bigger tools, they don't get better tools, they get much faster at what they're doing. So we as defenders have to build our patching capabilities so we can be as quick or quicker than the adversary can exploit.
And last question to you, Steve. When we think about the world of agentic AI from the perspective of a threat landscape and containment specifically, right? You talked about that 30-minute, from something being somewhat of risk to being catastrophic. We know that those timelines are reducing significantly. How do you think about the world of containing threats in agentic world, and where do you see the human interaction, the human response, the human ownership remaining? Like, where do you see that line cutting off?
And it's going to depend on the individual systems and what the data is that you're worrying about. So again, we believe that you have to have human accountability from end to end. You have different ways to implement that. And there are things that I might take an opportunity to do, for example, in protecting your laptop, that I'm perfectly happy to do with an agent automatically, because the blast radius is your laptop. Whereas a production service that's running in AWS, I may not be comfortable with an agent doing that. What I want is the agent to say, there's a problem, here's a possible solution, here's the tests that I've run against it, and here is my conclusion on why it should be deployed. Then a person who can reason, make good decisions, has good intent, looks at it and says, yeah, I agree with it, or maybe we should shift it, change it a little bit in this way. And getting that loop tight and really quick is something that we have to focus a lot on in order to stay ahead in this race.
So Steve, you wake up to an organization that looks at 1 billion adverse threats a day. That's probably only going to grow.
Yep.
What are the priorities for you and the team? What does the next 6 to 12 months look like, and where are you really, I guess, honing in from the perspective of security for Amazon?
So we are focusing on building tools that allow us to use agents to do our job more quickly and more effectively. It's about finding ways that we can unload our staff from doing the undifferentiated heavy lifting that they would otherwise have to do, and allow them to use that uniquely human skill, which is judgment, and applying that in areas where the tooling is just not capable.
I love that. A uniquely human skill that is judgment. Steve Schmidt, thank you so much for joining us on theCUBE.
Thank you.
I'm Gemma Allen here at theCUBE with AWS in Washington, DC for the 2026 Summit. We have a great show today. We're talking sovereign clouds, cybersecurity, AI and the role of technologists for government, for public sector. Lots of great folks coming up. Stay tuned.